Good afternoon. I'm Sally Monastery, president of Scripps Fine Arts Foundation, and I'm glad you're all here for our meeting with Judith Davies this afternoon. Before I introduce the introducer, a couple of art opportunities coming up. On April 3rd, we have our annual Senior Studio Tour. It's at 3 o'clock at the Lang Art Studios over near Williamson Gallery on, must be about 11th and Dartmouth. Yeah, thank you. April 10th, our meeting will be at 2 p.m. at the Claremont UCC Church with Marcella Sweat with her program on chalk art and Disney Imagineering. Then our special big gala for the year will be our year-end meeting on May 16th at 11:30, and it will be a joint meeting with the Rembrandt Club down on the Pomona campus. And our featured speaker will be Woody Dyke, growing up in Claremont in a fantasy land of artists. So watch for information about the last three events in our upcoming newsletter and mailers. And with that, I'd like to introduce Janet Johnson, who will introduce our speaker.
I'm Janet Johnson. I'm on the board with the Scripps Foundation. And finally, we have Judith Davies with us. We've had several attempts in the past to get her here, but with COVID and whatnot, we couldn't do it. Judith is a sculptor, art teacher, sculptor, conservator, a former dancer, and also enjoys working with dancers, especially in costume design for African and Afro-Cuban dance. She's made several trips to Cuba to work and study. She went to graduate school. Well, but before that, she studied with Aldo Casanova here at Scripps and graduated in 1969. And then she went on to graduate school at UCLA in dance choreography and received her MFA in sculpture at Tyler School of Art, Temple University. She lived in Italy for 5 years and has received a Fulbright for sculpture in Italy and an Andrew Mellon faculty grant for research in Egypt. Judith has been working in her field for over 50 years. Her own sculptures are often cast in bronze, and larger pieces also combine wood and stone. Working with conservators, museums, and private collectors, she has restored bronze sculptures by Rodin, Henry Moore, Lipchitz, Hepworth, Smith, Noguchi, and many others. Her work reflects continued research into ancient cultures and the insight and the understanding that those cultures can have on modern-day concerns. She's also involved with current issues of Native Americans who have lived in the Los Angeles basin for thousands of years, and they are continuing to fight for justice and protection for their culture and sacred sites. Currently, Judith is working with mixed media sculptures and installations that are focused on such issues as pollution of our oceans, global warming, fossil fuel dependency, climate change, and endangered species because of human actions. She has many years of experience of sculpture, conservation as well. She has worked both individually and with teams and other conservators around the country on large-scale outdoor bronze sculptures. Please join me in welcoming Judith Davies.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I have been to Scripps several times over the years, and the gallery, the Williamson Gallery always has these amazing shows, so I was here recently for those. Anyway, I would like to start with the Scripps land acknowledgement for the Tongva and the indigenous people that are still here and have been here for thousands of years. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Scripps College sits within the historic homeland of the Tongva people. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and colonization in our area. We acknowledge the strength and resilience of the Tongva people of the past, present, and future as the original caretakers of the land, water, and air, and we recognize our responsibility to be respectful stewards of the Scripps College campus. Today, this area and this campus are home to many Indigenous people from across the globe, and we are proud that they are part of our community and institution. We recognize that a land acknowledgement is not an end in itself and must be part of a larger landscape of individual, collective, and institutional commitments. We hope this statement will serve as a resource for Scripps departments, institutes, and organizations seeking to honor Indigenous peoples in various communications and gatherings, including events, program materials, and publications. So I just wanted to further acknowledge Julia Bogany, who was for several years until her passing in 2021. She was an educator, communicator, interpreter, and liaison of the Tongva for Pitzer and the 5 colleges. Also wanted to mention the Robert Redford Conservancy, which I think is incredible for native plants and also a gathering place for the Indigenous peoples for their very important ceremonies and the plants and the needs they have for prayers and continuing the culture. So all of that is really remarkable and wonderful. So that's all part of what's happening at Scripps. And I know Scripps has just, in the past, since about 2021, I think, has a minor in Native American and Indigenous studies. So that also is really, really important and wonderful. So with that, I'd like to move to talking about my work. I do have a new website, and that's listed in the front of our PowerPoint here. But I don't usually have the very early pieces on that website. But I did start with that this time because it really does connect me in those early pieces with Scripps and with my professor there, Aldo Casanova. This is a picture of him at a dedication of his sculpture that was and is located near the Williamson Gallery. I spoke at that time at his dedication as one of his first students. I was here in 1966, I believe, when he first started as a professor here. An amazing man, an amazing professor, amazing artist. He had won the Prix de Rome, and so he had a lot of experience firsthand with being in Italy. And when I first saw his work as he presented it to us as students, I immediately just said, that's what I want to do. I want to be a sculptor. I want to travel. I want to go to Egypt. I want to go to Italy. You know, I was just, the light went on. And he warned us. He said, you don't think that you're going to be able to make a career out of this, and you'll need to be able to sell at least one sculpture a month. And I know how long it took me to do one sculpture. And so I thought to myself, well, I guess I have to figure out another way to be able to still do this. He's teaching, maybe I could teach, and so on. So, but I was going to do it by any means necessary, okay? So thanks to Aldo, and he continued to be a guiding force in my career and my choices and paths that I took throughout for many years. So I want to pay special respects to Aldo. I can't talk about conservation, but it was one of my ways of continuing my own work was through this field of conservation. And you'll see Flight, which is the long, large sculpture on the left-hand side that is of Aldo's, and it's at Fullerton. That was a piece that I had restored as an independent conservator. And the middle one is at Palos Verdes, the Malaga Plaza. It's an Italian marble Neptune fountain that was vandalized, and because of my experience in Rome, which I'll talk about a little bit, I was able to take a mold of the missing parts that could be replaced, and I took those molds to Italy, to Pietrasanta, and had them carved there, and they were brought back, and we reinstalled that. That was under Steve Colton from the head conservator of LACMA. So I worked with him quite a bit. And the right-hand side is Rodin, and I have a couple of slides of work there, but that's in a foundry where we restored all the Rodins that are at the Norton Simon Museum, the outdoor bronzes, and including all the Burgers of Calais and all of them, the Thinker, etc. So that's a whole nother, area to talk about, but I just wanted to mention that the Scripps Humanities program, all of the art history that I took with Dr. Stevens, all was instrumental in my ability to be able to carry through with this direction, because it really gave so much information and context to the work. It's not only about chemistry and what's happening to the surface, it's about those cultural treasures and the context of where they come from and how we need to preserve them. Another background sort of information before I get into the onslaught of the works. My graduate work was at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia, but they also have a Rome campus. And so I went to Aldo 2 years after being as a dance major at UCLA. I decided I wanted to go back into sculpture and to be able to do both, because I love dance and I wanted to be able to combine them, but it was very difficult. So I took dance when I could, and I was a member of the Virginia Story Crawford Company for 2 years in LA. But circumstances where it was just very difficult. And so I asked Aldo, and he said, you should really apply for this program in Italy and go to Italy. And the first year would be graduate work, first year in Rome and second year in Philadelphia with Tyler School of Art. So, okay, I'll do that. And I did get in. So that was another trajectory in my development, I should say, at that point, and an eye-opening experience, and I just loved it. So when I finished the second year in Philadelphia, I applied for a Fulbright grant to go back to Italy, to Rome, and receive the Fulbright grant. So what you have here are two images of both Rome and the archaeology, the Foro Romano, but also a building where I had my studio for the Fulbright. And that was at Campo di Fiori. If any of you know that area, there's an open air market happening every day. And the upper windows there were where my studio was. And then had a show at the end of the term of a year. And so I'll show you those photos too. But one other aside, because of all of this Italian experience, I was able to take students, college students, for about 6 years, I think, in the summers, as part of a combination of SUNY Stony Brook, Connecticut College, and Fordham University. Combined their enrollment, and we went to Italy, and for a month I was teaching Renaissance art history and taking students all over the city into museums and so on. So that's a long, involved sort of explanation of my relationship with Italy. But during my early years, I was very frustrated because I wanted to do sculpture, but I had all of this dance background. And the professors there in Rome said, well, why don't you do some sculpture that moves or that incorporates some of your aspects of dance? So I started doing these kind of simple forms that incorporate fragments of the body cast. In this case, it's the shoulder to shoulder. And in those days, we were told that, and the theory was that dance emanated from the solar plexus, which is in the center of your chest. So I thought, okay, I'll take that idea and try to expand on it and make it into sculpture, but make it so that it looks like it moves. Okay, so again, more of that kind of thinking, a body fragment that is moving, that has a gesture, that floats, that kind of dissipates, and it's being transformed by perhaps the space that it's in or the water that it's in. This is, again, this kind of thinking. And these are some pieces that I did in Rome during that Fulbright era that were exhibited at the consulate, the American embassy. This is one that's being shown there. After coming back to the States from Italy, I was fortunate to just land in near Princeton. There was a new sculpture institute that was funded by Seward Johnson at Johnson & Johnson, and he wanted to have a foundry schooling for graduate students who wanted to learn about casting bronze and foundry. So it was very specific and very, labor intensive, and it was an apprenticeship program. And I was hired as the academic director. And so I had the chance to do some work in bronze and change, mediums and learn all about that myself. And out of that, this is one kind of combination of bronze and solid cast resin, colors through it, that kind of prism look. And from there, I was we moved to Boston, and I was hired as an assistant professor at Wellesley College. This is my first teaching experience. And I was teaching bronze casting. They wanted a woman who could teach, all kinds of the various mediums of sculpture, but also bronze casting, as well as drawing and 3D design. And it was more than a full-time position. So these are some shots of that casting happening at Wellesley. And the two of the students there, wonderful students. I love the students. And they were just so achievement-oriented, of course, and would start with not knowing which end of the drill bit would go in the drill. And by the end of the semester, they were pouring bronze. Yeah. Yes, I love them. During that time period, I received Andrew Mellon grant to go to Egypt. I wanted to, again, following Aldo. I didn't realize that until much later, that I was still following Aldo's footsteps. I took this opportunity to go travel to Egypt. So started work. It took a while to sort of come to terms with what I was seeing and how I could make it, something personal and reflect on that whole experience. So it did take a while. And at the same time, during that, after leaving Wellesley, I went back down to New York to a studio there, my own studio. And Aldo had invited me one year to take his place here at Scripps while he was on sabbatical in Rome. So I did that. And during that time, I had this chance to work with Montclair Bronze, and they like Peter Shelton and some other people here at the Claremont Graduate School would also have this opportunity to work with Montclair Bronze and cast their work there. Sort of like a visiting artist situation where Tom Friedberg would allow an artist to set up in a corner of the foundry. It was a commercial foundry, and they're doing large-scale castings in bronze. But you as an artist could work there, and then they would pour the bronze for you. You would do the molding and the, set up and the chasing and the grinding and everything else afterwards, but they would pour the bronze. So that's one of the pictures here that you see, the Montclair bronze in there. That was an incredible experience. And I decided to move back to California. So after being at Scripps for that 1 year, I traveled, brought all my things back here, and set up downtown in one of the lofts down in the Santa Fe area, east part of the downtown. And I was able to work with a foundry there, and that's when I began working in conservation. And this is just one shot that I'll put in here because I also could work with this foundry and the people here as a team with Steve Colton on, as I mentioned, all the Rodins, the Norton Simon, but I could also work on my own pieces at that same foundry, and we'd exchange, like they would pour my work and I would do patinas for them, kind of thing, or I'd do some chasing for them. And it was a way, it's very expensive to do casting, so it was a way for me to be able to continue my own work as well, being at the foundry. Okay, so let's see if I can move a little faster. I had a show of those works that were brewing, that were kind of evolving out of the Egypt trip and my wanting to do bronze as well as incorporate some other mediums. So this is a slide of a show that was done at the Works Gallery with some larger pieces, and I was working in wood and stone and bronze. So overall shot, again, another view. This one is called Of Sky, and it's carved wood with an adze. I would chop away at it, and wanted to kind of, in a symbolic way, represent the sky as a form that reflects both upward and downward, like an eye. Anyway, and so of sanctuaries and of reflections, a stone, and then it's cast in iron. So that's a double image of reflections. This is of water and of fire. Just a close-up of the bronze. It's a bronze and cedar wood combination. The kind of whitish elements are bronze, cast bronze, and then the boat is kind of a reference to me anyway, to the the human, and our spirit and our travels and kind of transformations, if you will, in a very loose kind of way. But the boat represents that kind of a vehicle, sort of, for us. It's called Azimuth. Okay, and then these were some output of work that I was trying to refer to Egyptian hieroglyphs without actually doing them, but it had that sort of, I call them glyph series. And then I received 3 commissions from Hewlett-Packard, and they wanted bronze, and they wanted it like the previous one that I just showed. So this is what I was doing in Lost Wax. Again, a wall piece that would hang. This is a site installation in Mountain View on a wall there at their office, their main office in Mountain View. Okay, it's a bad slide, but it's what they sent for their location. This was the second one that was in Toronto, the Hewlett-Packard office in Toronto. So these are a few closer views of those individual. They're all bronze, and they were, initially I had made handmade paper, a certain size, dipped the paper in wax, and then made the other forms in wax, attached them to it, and then that all became lost wax castings. They were all done the same way, but just with different symbols. And this is the last one that was commissioned for their Zurich office. A couple of details of that. Talk about this. Each one kind of has a reference to a person in my mind. Like one is the teacher, the scribe, the basket maker, the weaver, and the storyteller. And there, each one is about roughly 30 inches across and maybe 24 down or something. And they're bronze, of course. And this is kind of following that same sort of theme. We took a trip to both Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. And so when I came back, I wanted to kind of do something based on that experience. So there were some references to, and these 3 here, as you can see, there are 9 total, but there's 3 of them I was able to bring today. There's an oil lamp, some scrolls, some hieroglyphs, some sort of cuneiform attempts. I wanted to refer to it. It's not as though I could write in it, but it all sort of is reference to these ancient, ancient civilizations that are so astounding to me. Okay, so recent work. I'm still casting in bronze as well as other things, and this is a slide of 3, what I call 3 guardians. Guardians of air is the bird, earth is the female, and the fish is water. And I'm very concerned with the environmental issues and with endangered species and the disappearance of, what we know of at all levels, in all places. So this is sort of wanting to make a piece that would extend beyond time and that would have that appearance of being ancient. And as ancient, it could continue way past my brief moment here on Earth and so on, and can hopefully extend the life and protection for those symbolic areas of nature. And in doing that, I'm also very involved in my own way for monarch butterflies, and I've been doing that raising them for probably since about 2016. So this also has an aspect of the garden and saving monarch butterflies and so on, and it gives me great pleasure. It really, when all else seems as though it's out of your control and you can't really do much about whatever is frustrating and painful, I can always go into the garden, and that's a retreat for me. Some recent bronzes, this here, the middle one there, that's sort of a bird, they call it a ritual calling bell. It's actually a bell. It does ring. So, and then the other I didn't bring, but it's a bird's nest. It's called Bird Song. And that was cast in bronze, of course, but it was kind of an experiment on my part, because to be able to cast an actual bird's nest is pretty questionable whether it will come out or not. But it did manage to come out very well, and it also has acorns that I had gathered in the high Sierra, or foothill areas in the mid-valley, and feathers and eggs and so on. So those are some of my recent attempts at bronze casting in a smaller scale. Then I'm really have been for a number of years concerned with the inability for the sacred sites and the Native Americans to be able to protect their grave sites, the sacred sites that are all throughout the United States. But in this particular situation here in Los Angeles in 2004, there was a grave site, a cemetery that was uncovered during the course of building Playa Vista. So it hit the newspapers, New York Times, as well as California, the LA Times, and it was very disturbing and upsetting because the grave site, the cemetery I should call it, was the largest in the country at that time, and it ended up with the count being more than like 1,000, 1,500 remains, and it dated from even the 1800s all the way back to thousands of years in the same area, the same site. So there were protests, and I wanted to do something. This is at Bayona Wetlands, if you're familiar with that. It's, near the marina in Los Angeles, Marina del Rey. So I decided to do a kind of educational protest effort. I was working with a group called Save Bayona and also with Sierra Club. And so this was an article on this particular project that I did with students from 3 different schools, from Venice High School, Loyola, and CalArts. And so they made what we called ancestor banners, which were to pay homage and respect to the ancestors of the Tongva, given the fact that their graves were being desecrated, basically. And so between those students, they made 100 of these banners, and they were exhibited at the Loyola University on the bluffs there, overlooking that area that was being dug up. And the Tongva, Anthony Morales is the chief of one of the bands, they had a prayer vigil during that time as well on the bluffs there at Loyola. So these are just examples of a couple of the 100 of the prayer ancestor banners. There's Julia again, Julia Bogny, that I mentioned in the very beginning here at Scripps and Pitzer. She and Tina Calderon, which is to the left there, are both Tongva, and as I mentioned, Julia was here with the 5 colleges for years and being the liaison, so to speak, and teacher. So they were very gracious to help me do a Zoom meeting for Sierra Club. And it had to do with the fact that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife are planning to, and they have been for like 15 years, planning to dig up the remaining of the wetlands, calling it a restoration. And it certainly is not. And that area is now designated the Native American Heritage Commission as a sacred site. So they will also be doing a similar thing as what they did previously. Thousands of tons of soil to be dug up and relocated and changed around to make basically a flood basin, which makes no sense given sea level rise and so on, opening it up to full tidal. So given all of it and salination of underground aquifers and so on, it just makes no sense. But there are vested interests in having it done, and so we're still going on with having to fight that. So Tina and Julia were, as I said, they were very gracious to be a part of that, and a part of it, not a part of offering a prayer, and the Zoom was entitled Water is Sacred, Water is Life. Okay. So these are just a few slides of other examples of, this was on Earth Day, of our destruction of, or our pollution and our, wasteful way of dealing with both water, fresh water, and the ocean. So it's a sort of a casket with polluted water bottles and the ocean, for the picture of the ocean there, photograph. This is another one to raise money for Save Bayona. It's there was an auction. This is called Canto for Yamaya, and I have been studying Afro-Cuban dance for several years, 20 years, going to Cuba quite a bit, and so every year, at least once a year. So I wrote this poem called Canto for Yamaya, and again with the photo of the ocean there at Santa Monica. And also there would be a ceremony that goes along with that as a sort of blessing and a song for Yamaya, who is the deity, by the way, of ocean, the saltwater deity in the Afro-Cuban pantheon. Okay, and this is another piece, the third of the what I call cantos. This is called Manifest Destinies, for want of a better title. But the idea here is that it's a cast aluminum boat, which I cast from the remains of a boat that was out on a beach that I took a mold of and then cast it in bronze. So it's like 4 feet by 4 feet roughly, and it hangs on the wall with the rope that it ties to the sort of like message in a bottle, but then with the surrounding hundreds and hundreds of bottles and aluminum cans that are on the floor. Okay, and this is a very recent one, installation or potential installation called Telescopic Visions, and to see or not to see being sort of a play on words of to be or not to be, but also to see or not to see what you are actually doing. And the fact that there are references here to the Webb and the Hubble and the shuttle. And there's the top sphere has an image of the Andromeda galaxy. So they're up there floating around in dark space or vast space, I should say. And then the next tube, the glass tube that comes down like a telescope, I'm thinking, is filled with toys that are of cars and trucks and trains and whatever, airplanes, and it's got black ooze that is kind of running down. And then the next layer is the ocean with whales and dolphins and turtles and so on. And there's glass shards in there of blue glass that they float in. And following down, there are endangered species that continue to have this black ooze that follows through. And finally, the Ice Age, extinct dinosaurs. And the bottom image is the image of the world as seen from Apollo, the blue marble kind of image. Okay, so it's like seeing yourself or seeing your world from outer space and what you could actually decipher, what thinking beyond just the image, what is actually happening, and how we could change that. If we can go that far in space and do that much, we should certainly be changing our ways to protect and save and, cherish this earth that we've been living on. Okay, so I'm just mentioning that for several years, I've been working in fused glass as a sort of an outlet. It allows me to work in something beautiful that I dearly love, and it's so gratifying. It's almost like just a piece of glass will have just so much beauty in it that it's really wonderful to work with and no thoughts about it. So if you were to look at my website, there's a lot more of the glass on there. It didn't follow with this too well. So I began working with choreographers and dancers who needed some help with their costumes. And I thought, I can do that. I had been taking dance all of that time period, although not performing. I was teaching. I taught in Rome. And I took classes in African and Afro-Cuban dance for the past 20 years. So this is a costume that is of a deity, as Yemaya is a deity. This is a deity of peace and justice and strength and it's both male and female manifestations. Obatala is the male manifestation. Obanla is female. And this was performed at the Broad Theater. And I have it opens with this figure. And then she appears in other moments as well. But this is just a very 1 minute clip of how it. Thank you. Oddly enough, just by happenstance, a friend gave me this parachute, this white parachute, right? She and her husband had been working in a children's theater, and the parachute had been given to them to make clouds or something, and then, they'd hang it and so on, or backdrop or whatever. And they moved to Canada, so she gave me this parachute. So when Angela Jordan, the choreographer, who's a friend, said she wanted to do something very strong about peace needed in Nigeria. This was during the Boko Haram time period when villages were being massacred and women, girls were being kidnapped from schools and so on, if you remember that era. She wanted to do something specifically for that, against that, and to pray for peace, basically. So that was just the beginning of the opening scene, and then it goes on. So this is another shot of a piece here at Pomona. I had a very dear friend, Catherine Hagedorn, who was head of the Afro-Cuban sacred drumming part of the ethnomusicology department at Pomona. And I had this plan and actually followed through with trying to put together an hour-long dance piece that would have air, earth, fire, and water aspects, different sections. And it would have 3 screens happening with dance. And the screens would have footage of different places within the world that needed protection or that had indigenous people who were in those places, like the Amazon rainforest, various other places that were beautiful and important and having people there who respected it and had ways of carrying on their traditions to participate within that, in that element. I don't know if this makes any sense, but at any rate, this was a fire section, and fire to me was both creative and destructive, but because fire, I use fire both for making glass and for doing bronze casting and so on, I preferred to think of it as a creative sort of transforming element, you know. And so we had just started going to Cuba, and Catherine Hagedorn said, you know, you should perhaps do your fire section here at Pomona. And she invited me to work with some students. I did some choreography with students who were interested, the two women there. And then professional dancers came, that's Muñeco and Katy Hernandez, to perform the traditional dance for those particular deities. That is, Chango is a king, and he's connected with lightning and strength and protection and fire. And Katy is one of the three wives, she's performing Oya, who is one of the three wives of Chango, and she's a female warrior, and she holds her own against anyone, and can be furious. She's connected with hurricanes. So that is one chance to do that, and I'll show you some excerpts at the very end of a couple of those things, those air, earth, fire performances. This is, I started doing costumes for both Katy Hernandez and Angela, as I showed you. And Katy is here at, Katy is here also at Pomona again in another performance, performing El Agua. El Agua is like a trickster. She can be both, has something like 23 different pathways, and needs to be honored at the beginning of a ceremony and at the end of the ceremony, or he can turn it upside down. So you know, and he loves candy and he loves children and he likes to make things, you know, out of order and so on. So you want to respect him, and he's actually very powerful. So she's performing the traditional dance of El Agua. And at the right-hand side, she's also performing at the Brazil. It's a studio in Los Angeles. She's showing the dance of Oshun, who's the deity of beauty and laughter and money and all kinds of, you know, positive things. And she's connected to fresh water as opposed to Yamaya, who's connected to salt water. Okay. There's a third person that I work with, Nzinga Kamara. She was my teacher for years in African dance. And she's recently asked me to work with her company at times when they need some special costumes. So it's to augment the costumes that she already has, especially the men, they have different. Of course, when you're working with these traditions, you're actually kind of participating in stories that are traditional that get passed on. So you're learning, and you have to respect those stories, and you have to also certainly research them and use the appropriate, you know, materials, costumes, especially African costumes. The materials themselves can tell a story, the printing on the materials and so on. So it's very important to do the research and know exactly what is needed and confer with her back and forth. So this one is a performance that was done at Leimert Park in Los Angeles. And then the one on the right-hand side is at Pershing Square just last year. And I think those are the only two that I put in there. Okay, so costumes, sets. I enjoy working backstage. I like being able to contribute to make the story happen. You know, it's like you've got a whole picture within the theater, and the story develops. And so it excites me to be able to make it, you know, really come alive. So I made these round huts and the costumes and so on, and some accessories, baskets and so on that the students used. Actually, that one round hut was also performed here at Scripps. And some of the certain times, this is what they call a mask for the Baga group of Guinea, and it's brought out and performed and danced in a community setting where they're celebrating fertility and the new year and childbirth and so on. So it has to do with, continuation of life. And every year at a certain time they bring it out. Okay, a couple more costumes. A shaman on one hand, and a sort of contemporary, my version of a contemporary version. It was a little bit more, it wasn't traditional, but it had some aspects of the shells on the tops and the long panels. Two more here, and I think we're getting close to just the segments of the dance. So these are drumming costumes. This was at the drum festival at Watts Towers. And these are some costumes. I always want to make the drummers happy. They kind of get left out a little bit and they bring their own things, but it doesn't always work with the rest of it. So they have to be part of the whole picture. And these drummers this is at the Broad Theater. This is a backstage. And they're all from Africa. They're from different countries in Africa. But the one on the right he teaches at Santa Barbara. You see Santa Barbara. There's a company or a place called Motherland Drums where they have drum classes and sell drums and so on. So there are these centers, and they also perform with other companies in different places, and they also teach and perform or play for classes at universities like at Santa Monica College and UCLA. Okay, so really nice guys. Okay, so let's see, I'll just stop right here 1 second just to explain. As I mentioned, I had this idea of doing air, earth, fire, and water with screens, and so that the images would be of a place and the dance would be, involved, modern dance, but having to do with being in that place. Okay, so the first, I'll just step back and let you watch one after the other. They're about 1.5 minutes each one. This first one is going to be the rainforest, and my husband Larry and I went down to the Lacandon rainforest, and I already had this in mind, so I was taking all this video of the rainforest there in the Lacandon rainforest. And so that's the footage in the background. And the second one is Fire, which was performed, as I said, here at Pomona. And there's just a little excerpt of that. And we had to, because of the small space at Pomona, the music performing area was small. So we just put the 3 screens in a line across the top so it wouldn't interfere with the rest of it. And the last one is Water. And it was had to do with a Native American prayer and story. And the water images are both of, which you won't see all of it, but it extends from the high Sierras, water that's coming down in the very early spring, rushing down from places in the high Sierra, and the ocean all the way up the coast of California from LA up to past San Francisco. So those images or those videos were things that I shot, and then I got together with an editor, a very good friend, and we would go to a professional editing place at midnight, and we could work until early in the morning for free. So because he had that connection, so that's how we got it done. Anyway, so I'll just be quiet. leave you with this last slide. This was what I took yesterday at my home, the first monarch of the spring. And I wish you all happy vernal equinox. And the first 2 eggs that she laid there. So we're off and flying.
My first question has to do with your artistic journey has been so varied and so interesting. Have you thought of doing a biography?
Oh, this is my biography. This is more than
Okay.
I've, done in having to do with my own work. This
Okay.
is just, this is
I think
seriously. I get so involved because it is so different. It
Yeah.
really depends on what comes my way, what the opportunities are, and I love doing all of it. But if a dancer asks me to do, some costumes, I'll say sure, and I'll go in that direction for a few months. Or, I take glass because that's a constant. I can do that every Friday. I have the workshop and I can do that. But it really does depend on what comes my way, and so I'm like focused on whatever that is. And to have to look back, which is what I did for this, is really a first time thing for me.
Right.
Seriously.
Well, anyway, I think it would be
Thank you, but
it would be very interesting. One more question: how in the world did you get the parachute to inflate and deflate?
it's sort of like the gods willed it. I mean, we have this big asphalt shoot up driveway, but when Angela came over, I said, well, I have this parachute that might work as a skirt. And so, I'd have to modify the waistband, but we just laid it all out and measured it all and put it out on the driveway. And, and we pretended, she got in it and pretended that, there was a waistband and it could work. And it looked fine. And then we got 3 or 4 people to just lift it up and drop it down, and the air gets trapped in there. And because it has a little rope around the whole outside edge of it, it acts like a kind of like a rim or a lip or something, So if you lift and the waistband is tight, so it captures the air there, and you just lift it up, and they'll do that in the darkness. So when the light comes up, the stage, the stage lighting, she's standing there already in the middle of the stage, out of the darkness, with this giant, 40-foot span of a white dress. And then she would lift it. She could actually, as you saw, it's actually very, you have to learn how to, and she was a professional dancer. You'd have to learn how to manipulate it, and her moves were according to that.
Hi, Judith. Thank you for your talk. I have a comment and a question. I'm Erin Curtis. I'm the new director of the Williamson Gallery, so thank you for mentioning us.
Okay.
And specifically, I wanted to share for everyone here that the Aldo Casanova sculpture that you showed in that picture of Professor Casanova was recently conserved by one of our gallery interns, cleaning and updating the bronze just last summer. So it's in wonderful shape. Come and see it, and come and see us at the gallery. The ceramic annual is open through the 7th, and that's the last promoting I'll do. Again, thank you. I think there are so many interesting through lines and juxtapositions in your work, everything from, I'm really interested in this kind of through line of past, the ancient forms, and then at the same time with a concern for the future in terms of the environment or the persistence of native traditions or things like that. So that's a really interesting kind of thing. And then also the movement in your work from sculpture that moves to costume as moving sculpture. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the influences, maybe here at Scripps or otherwise, that have led to kind of those themes in your work.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if this is on. Is it on? Okay. When I was a student here, I loved dance, and I had been dancing, from when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. ballet and whatnot. And here there was a chance to work with, take classes in modern dance. Well, it was a half of a course. It wasn't even a full course in those years. There was no major. And it wasn't even, equivalent to a philosophy course or something. So, but I still kept taking these classes. And then a woman, a teacher came from UCLA, Virginia Story Crawford, who was teaching in the dance. And it was fascinating because she had all these different aspects. Kenneth Patchen, I think, was the musician that made all of these kind of sculptural instruments. You'd play them. There'd be, all these strange things, but it was like a giant sculpture. And so when I graduated, I should say, I wanted to do, back in those days, there was the Theater of Mixed Means, there were happenings, there were, artists that were working like Rauschenberg and Andy Warhol, and these people were working with Merce Cunningham and, Twyla Tharp, all these people coming out of the Judson Street Theater. I was fascinated with that as a student here, And so I decided, well, we don't have a dance major, but I could combine them, sculpture and dance, in a performance. So I sort of geared everything that semester to sort of mixed media. There was video and other dances as well that went into the whole evening. But I did a piece that was incorporating Krapp's tape with movement and talking and some whatever. But it was a mixture. It was a real mixed bag. And that's what got me hooked into the idea of, well, if I'm going to do dance, I should do it now, because you have a time span in your life when. So when Virginia Crawford had her company in Los Angeles and invited me to be a member of her company and go to graduate school at UCLA, I said, great, this is the time to do that. So that's what I immediately did. From leaving here, I went to UCLA in dance, but it was in choreography, and always had the idea that I would do pieces that would be this kind of like mixed, happenings and things on the street, and non-dancers working together and talking and repeating things and silence and repeated motions, all those kinds of things that were happening. So that, and then at UCLA, Kent State shootings happened that year. And
Kent State, the killings of the protests that were happening throughout the United States over the Vietnam War, and after the Kent State killings of the students on campus, Ronald Reagan, who was the governor here, shut down all of the UC campuses in California. So the campus at UCLA, where I was studying the dance, got shut down. And of course, the professors were doing classes on the grass and so on. And, it was just a very different sort of setup and vibe, different thinking in different times. So, so we were doing dance elsewhere. But also, long story short, we were doing it in ways that were unconventional, and there was an art and technology show at USC that I performed in with some people from the department. You could still perform there. So it was a strange time, and I kept taking classes in other private studios during that time for about another year. But that's where I decided, this was a struggle that I wasn't mastering. I wasn't able to do that. So I decided to go the route of sculpture and do it that way, do that cross purposes. But anyway, I was always dancing, and as I say, I was teaching even in Rome. They were interested in American dance. Merce Cunningham, even Martha Graham style, and Jose Limon or anything. So I was teaching there
as an American teaching American dance, you know.